So they can't list DSP KY1.
Right.
So they listed where this brand came from, which was DSP KY16. But that's misleading to the consumer. Because now the consumer knows.
I was just like, wait a second.
So now this brand says everything the same, it's still 100 proof, but it doesn't say bottle and bond. Mm-hmm. So I caused that not to happen.
We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on last week's episode, and we'll continue it again this week, talking about nothing but bottled and bond. March 3rd was the anniversary of the Bottled and Bond Act, so now it's officially 120 years old. And I'm telling you what, everyone in here is going to be in for a treat. So much so, Bernie's going to make us look sort of like idiots at times because he caught us off guard, and it kind of felt like we were back in the classroom. It was an enjoyable time being back at Bern's Corner. In other news, back on episode 38, we had Turner Moore talk about the Whiskey Obsession Festival. That's happening again in Sarasota, Florida, and tickets are on sale now at whiskeyobsessionfestival.com. To keep this show going, please take a minute and support the show on Patreon. We've got sponsorships starting at just $1 a month that gets you unedited footage, koozies, and of course, limited edition t-shirts. In fact, there is so much extra footage from this episode, there is almost an additional 45 minutes that you can only hear if you're a Patreon supporter. So visit patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit.
Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof, and the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long.
Play Whiskey Wednesday Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select 2 doors at checkout, and if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixirs Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order.
Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. Kenny and Ryan here today, and we're with a former guest. And I'm actually very, very happy to be doing this because this is kind of what we want to kind of start like a small little mini series, I guess you could say. It's been something that Ryan and I have talked about because we always seem to be the ones that might be I don't know, contributing to the problem that's in the market today. And we want to just start back and maybe just go with the basic education, right? And I'm really excited only because, the guests that we actually had on before, you can catch them in the earlier episodes. We'll introduce him here in a second, but he was strumming his guitar and doing some good lyrics for us in preparation for last year's Kentucky Bourbon Affair.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this show. I took an Uber here and see all these bottles of bourbon in front of me. I'm excited, so I'm ready to party. No, but I think it's good to get back to basics. We got a lot of people that are jumping into bourbon and they don't quite, understand all the aspects of it. So sometimes when we talk about things, you're probably like, what the hell does that mean? Or what are y'all? So yeah, I think it's a good idea for us to kind of do a back to basics kind of, history of bourbon to give those new folks something to look forward to.
And the topic today is talking nothing but bottled and bond, kind of where it started, why it started. And we actually we're drinking on some bottled and bond right now that Ryan was nice enough to be able to sample out. So Ryan, kind of just give us an idea of what we are drinking right here.
Yeah, so my great aunt, I was like, hey, I just been asking all my relatives, hey, do you have any old bottles of bourbon? And she's like, yeah, I got a couple of these. So she had 3 Old Bardstown bottle and bonds, but it was actually distilled at Heaven Hill because it says DSP KY31, so it's distilled there before the fire. So not exactly sure what year it is, but we know it's before the thing burnt down. So
well, awesome. So let's go ahead and introduce our guests. So today we have a return guest to the show. So we have Bernie Lubbers. Bernie is a whiskey ambassador for Heaven Hill, also known as the Whiskey Professor. And if you haven't caught him before, make sure you go and check out our past episodes. It was number 36 and number 37, where we kind of just talked about Heaven Hill in general, the brands and everything like that. So Bernie, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
All right.
Welcome to Bern's Corner.
That's right.
That's true. We didn't really talk about where we're sitting right now, are we?
We're in Bern's Corner, and there's a shit ton of bottles. It's really awesome.
So I guess before we do dive into it, kind of talk a little bit about your collection and how you go about organizing it, because we can tell that you do organize it in a way that you've got all these things that say the number 100 in one specific corner.
Yeah, so this is my home bar, and so welcome. So it's the first podcast from my home bar here. So the way I have my bar arranged, and I know many people who have much better collection. They make a lot more money than I do, and they can afford a lot more whiskeys than I can. People think I get free stuff all the time. We're a family-owned company at Heaven Hill. I don't expect to get, there's some stuff that I do get, but I'm like everybody else. I got to go buy stuff, our Parkers or whatever. I have to go buy that just like anybody else does. I can't
camp in line like we did.
It depends. I do have a little connections here and there, but still, I just don't magically. I'm not going to ask Max and Kate and Andy and Alan to, give me a $300 bottle. I mean, that's not fair. I love this episode because I like the everyday stuff. I love what we're going to be talking about because I don't want to, there's unicorns are unicorns. They're hard to get a hold of.
Yeah.
And then once you're finished with them, they're like, oh God, that's gone. I wish we had that again. Yeah. Well, wait a minute. I want the stuff every day that I can get. But so to the left here, I have all my bottle and bond collection. So there's about 25, 26 bottle and bonds. Some of them don't make anymore. Some of them are from years past, but most of them are what you can get today. That's pretty cool. So I have that. Then on the right-hand side, as you can notice, there's one little row, about the third row, that has, I have a couple gins, I have a couple rums, but other than that, this whole bar is nothing but whiskey, basically American whiskey and bourbons. Up on the shelves that are kind of have the barrel hoops in front of them, that's some of my Parker's collection.
Those are your unicorns.
That's all my unicorns. Then I have some import only, some Japanese or some Korean export only that I'm lucky enough to be able to get a hold of. There's an old I.W. Harper from the 80s up there. There's some of my Elijah Craig's 18s and 23s and things like that. And on the very top are some cool cognacs and tequilas up there. So then I have...
That's for late night. Late night.
Right. Some of the coolest things I have around here are sample bottles. So and that's what people don't realize is, we can get these unicorns. unicorns. The unicorny of the unicorns, the unicorniest of the unicorns are samples.
It's the stuff that doesn't make it to the shelf.
Yeah, and they're one-of-a-kind bottles usually. So I'm the guy in the distillery who's not asking for something free for a unicorn. I'm like, hey, Chris or Mike or Danny, Charlie, you got any old samples? And I got some. Oh, sure, we're gonna throw them away or whatever. Whatever. I'm like, don't throw them. Not that they don't throw them away, but they were just gonna give them to me.
You're in the lab poking around.
That's the unicorniest of the unicorns is the sample bottle.
Well, that's awesome. So one thing I want to do is we gotta justify why you are the I guess you could say the SME here, the subject matter expert, and you've got something that's
you've got to justify. I've got to justify every day.
Well, go ahead and talk about what you have on your arm and kind of what that means to you in regards of bottle and bond.
Well, I started talking about bottle and bond about 10 years ago. I've only been in the industry for 11 years, so I'm still pretty much a newbie. But when I was growing up here in Kentucky, here in Louisville and around, I was noticing this bottle and bonds, and my best friend's parents, the Hallorans, she says that the old Fitzgerald was their favorite bottle and bond. And I'm like, well, I've seen, a couple other ones around. I've seen this. She goes, well, this is the best. There's nothing better than old Fitzgerald and blah, blah, blah. So I was just always enamored with bottle and bonds. That was the 1980s. I really was just, I was still drinking bourbon and sevens and bourbon and Cokes and bourbon and whatever. It's like, it wasn't, that's what you did. And so I was and my dad would say, well, it's the good stuff. I'm like, what does that mean? He really didn't know, other than it was 100 proof. But he was just saying, oh, that's the good stuff. It says under government supervision. And, so I was just always enthralled. And when I got in the industry, I wanted to learn more about it. And then that's when I started getting into, it was Jerry Dalton, who was the master distiller at Jim Beam. And he gave me a copy of the Standards of Identity. And that's when I really started falling in love with the words on labels and the laws that make it. Because if you look today, and it's more important today than it was 10 years ago, each word on label, the words Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, the words distilled and bottled by, the words bottled in bond, they mean something by federal law. And I was just just totally enthralled. And now today it's more relevant than ever because you got so many of these little so-called craft distilleries. I personally, just like one of our distillers, Denny Potter, says, we're a craft distillery at Heaven Hill. We're just successful. We all started out making just a few barrels a day,
right.
So, we all started out, but don't blame us that we become successful and we're just putting more equipment in. We're still a craft distillery, which explains why people line up for Parkers and line up for our barrel proofs. Those are the craftiest of craft, because most craft distilleries don't have anything over 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months old. We have things up to 23 years old. They can't even dream of having, and if they do, they have it, 2 bottles of it for, $8,000 a piece, much less, available around the country or the world for $200 or $30 for a 10-year-old, bottle. So it means there's something now more than ever today, knowing how to read words on labels for great everyday bourbons, I think is where people need to go. I've been preaching it for 10 years now, and now it's become more, so I can look at that bottle that you brought in and pretty much tell you, and you nailed it right on the head. You said, I know this is from Heaven Hill because it says DSP KY31. Well, bang, right there. That's the importance of bottle and bond. You must list who made it. And you must list the specific distilled spirits plant number. So you don't know where a lot of this stuff comes from. If it's sourced, a company, who are this? Who is this? Well, with bottle and bond, you know exactly who made it. So you don't know much about that brand, but you know exactly who made it and almost when. It doesn't have a tax stamp on it, so it's after the 70s. It's before the fire, so it's before, 1996. So we've pretty much pegged we know it's 4 years old. There's no age statement on it. By law, a bottle and bond must be a minimum of 4 years old. If it was older than that, they'd brag about it. Right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it has to be, so bottle and bond has to be from one specific season. So we know that's 4 years old and from Heaven Hill Distilleries.
And it's fantastic.
There you go. So I guess that's a good way to kind of start kicking it off and really getting into the reason why. I guess let's rewind back to middle of 1800s and the reason why this bottled and bond really started making a presence and what was the real issue or necessity behind it.
Well, there's always several reasons for everything. There's not one thing. There's a lot of things happening in the late 1800s. You've got the after the Civil War, you've got a big tax that's put on whiskey. Basically, that's what people are drinking is whiskey. They drink whiskey, they drink brandy, right? They drink cognac down in New Orleans. There's a little bit of gin, but whiskey's the big deal. And we had put a tax on after every war. We tend to like to have a lot of wars. So the Revolutionary War, there was a tax, and then Thomas Jefferson did away with that tax. Remember, there was the Whiskey Rebellion after that, but George Washington put the tax on, and Jefferson did away with it. After the War of 1812, there was a tax. And then it was when things were paid off, they did away with the tax. But after Civil War, it stuck. So now we got taxes. Then you have the immigration going on. You have, there was a wave of immigration before the Civil War, and there was a wave of immigration afterwards. So you had Ellis Island, 1,000 immigrants a day. From Asia and China, you had 1,000 immigrants a day coming through San Francisco and Angel Island.
This was before the wall.
This is Donald Trump would have hated this time. Right? Been a lot of vetting. There have been a lot of holding up there. There wouldn't be 1,000. There'd be 10 to get through that day. And then through New Orleans, where my grandparents and Max Shapiro's grandparents came through from Lithuania. Mine from Germany came through New Orleans, the port of New Orleans. So 1,000 immigrants a day. They're not rich, right? They don't have a lot of money, but whatever they have left over, they like to have a little drink, after they work real hard. They're building railroads. They're building dams and bridges and dangerous, crappy, dirty jobs, and like to have a belt after the thing, right? So they couldn't afford what we were calling this straight whiskey, which was, there's no laws for any of this. The distillers around here were calling straight whiskey that had the barrel gave all the flavor to and the color to. So basically adding just water to get it down to whatever strength. And people liked a good high strength. And then you had what they were calling compound whiskey. Pappy Van Winkle, Sally Van Winkle Campbell, she writes about this in But Only Fine Bourbon. The compound whiskey had things added to it. So you're basically taking neutral grain spirits, Everclear. Okay, remember being in high school having a party with Everclear, and now when you had
badly,
and so what did you do to that Everclear for your guests to make it so you could drink it?
Tons of fruit punch.
Actually, we used to use powdered Gatorade mix and just put that
Crystal
directly
Lights.
into it. Yeah, because
Call it the knockout.
Because at that point you're not even diluting; you're just flavoring it at that point.
So you were doing exactly what rectifiers were doing back in the late 1800s. They were taking Everclear and adding fruit juices and flavors to it. So you were doing exactly what they were doing, but they were then taking and putting a whiskey label on it. So if you read Mike Veach's book, Bourbon Whiskey and American Heritage, or Fred Minnick's book, Bourbon Curious, if you know, they talk about some of these recipes where they would add juices like cherry juice and prune juice, things like tobacco spit to give it a little texture, and that they would add iodine for color to give it that amber color, right? Because they thought it had to look like whiskey, and they would slap a whiskey label on it. There was nothing against the law about that. So that didn't set very well with some of these distillers around here who were making what they called straight whiskeys, right? Then you had also a gentleman.
I guess before we go there, I mean, when people were mixing and taking those kinds of whiskeys, I mean, were people still buying them and drinking them? Because if I think about it, technically, legally, it wouldn't be able to happen today. But if you put something on the market's going to test it, and then they're going to say, "Well, I'm just not going to buy it anymore." So what was the reason why people just
because you had these people from China and Europe and different places who couldn't afford this straight whiskey. If that's what you can afford, that's what you buy. And there was nothing on a label to protect you from anything. You thought it was whiskey, so you bought whiskey.
Right.
So there was nothing to protect you, right? There was no consumer protection laws out there. It was
didn't care what it tastes like. They just wanted to get
West.
drunk.
It was indeed the Wild West. And then you had Julius Kessler. I think he was from Austria. So he is a merchant, and he has a distillery, and he sees an opportunity, and he's going to start this thing called the Whiskey Trust. And the Whiskey Trust, of course, anytime there's the word trust in something, you got to be, my antennas go up, my little spidey senses, this guy's going to screw me, right? Or whatever. So look out. Don't trust this guy. He meant well. I think he just saw the opportunity as a business person to take advantage of something and to sell more stuff. So I don't think he did anything maliciously, but he wanted to sell directly to the bar. He wanted to sell directly to the people who were selling it. He didn't want to go through any other channels, right? So he wanted to sell directly through. There wasn't any laws about having to have distributors. Distributors were handy to have because they had sales forces and things, but you could make more money if you sold direct. So he was trying to get this through, and of course, he makes compound whiskey, but he makes it good. He's not putting in tobacco spit and cherry juice and prune juice. He's adding more things, more like caramel coloring or things like we do today. He was basically
natural, organic. So,
if you know Kessler's today, that's Julius Kessler. Okay. That's a American blended whiskey, like a Seagram 7, like a Kentucky Deluxe. We got a brand called Kentucky Deluxe or whatever. And they're all blended, which today means basically Everclear with caramel coloring, sugars, flavors added to it to make it look, smell, and taste like whiskey. And that's what we now today call blended whiskey, but they were calling that stuff compound whiskey back then. And so he was saying, I got a safe compound whiskey that you can trust. It's not going to make you go blind. It's not going to add whatever. And plus he's making more money. So he tried to get all these people together. Well, the folks in Kentucky and different areas who made this, what we call straight whiskey, they had an advocate in Washington. And if you watch Boardwalk Empire, he appears in there. That's John Carlisle. And he is the Secretary of Treasury of the United States. So he's important because his agents hold the keys to the distillery that had to also have a key with the master distiller to get in. Had to have both keys to get in. And they levy the taxes in these bonded warehouses, before bonded, they levied the taxes. This is before that. So he's important. Through other distillers lobbying for it, not all were for. Not all distillers were for this. I.W. Bernheim was not for this. Government regulation, sorry. See you later. I can understand it. I think he'd be glad that it went through. But that's in 1997. Is when the Bottle and Bond Act, and we're coming up on the anniversary. Mike Beach and myself and a few other people are going to be out and around in Louisville that night at Haymarket and Proof and a couple other places. So March 3rd, 1897 is when this act was passed. And so we're 120 years now into it. And that's when the Bottle and Bond Act was passed. And that's actually the very first consumer protection legislation in the history of the United States before we had any protection on anything. 9 years before the safe labeling of our food in the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. So 9 years before we cared about the labeling and safe labeling of our food, we cared more about the quality of our whiskey. Another reason to be proud to be an American. Right?
There you go.
And that's when the Bottle and Bond Act was passed and the laws were set down of what bottle and bond meant. And that's three of those most important words that are on your label.
So why did they pick 100 proof or 4 years? I can understand the 4, but why 100 proof? Why not 90 or 80? As you've seen a lot of brands proof at today.
Absolutely. So even today, we have something called a proof gallon. And that's what the government cares about because that's how they make their money. So 1 gallon of spirits at 50% alcohol is a proof gallon. And today we pay $13.50 per proof gallon. So so once you pay taxes on that, then you can water it down to 80. 80 is the lowest any whiskey can be in the United States. So it can't be below 40% alcohol or 80 proof. But you can be any proof up to barrel proof all the way down to 80 proof. But you've already paid taxes on the aggregate amount you have of whatever you're paying taxes and bottling on, which is 50% alcohol of 1 gallon. And then you times that by how many gallons you got, and that's how much money you owe the government. So that's why they chose 100 proof, because that's
Sounds like
a
a lot of taxes.
We pay a lot of taxes. That's right.
So kind of want to rewind back to the Bottle and Bond Act of 1897. And when I think about it, is there any kind of statute of limitations or anything like that? Because is this today still what can be considered a legal binding piece of history?
Absolutely it is. And I had somebody swore it was a marketing campaign, that it was like a small batch or very limited or whatever, special reserve or whatever. And there aren't any laws on those, like small batch or whatever. And that's not, it's kind of marketing, but that's kind of, Booker No coined the phrase small batch. But here in front of me, here is the standards of identity of distilled spirits. Subpart C, standards of identity for distilled spirits of the TTB, the Tax and Trade Bureau, page 48, lists all the laws, which makes neutral spirits or alcohol neutral spirits, grain spirits, whiskey, bourbon whiskey, rye whiskey, wheat whiskey, malt whiskey, rye malt whiskey, corn whiskey, straight whiskeys, all defined here. So these are on the books, and this is what we have to.
It's like the Constitution, right? It's not.
It's our, and it are laws. So you have to. It's the ways they're interpreted. They're in there. You can tell each section's not very long, but you could debate a couple points in here of things. But it tells you specifically what things are.
I guess what could you debate? I guess that's a good question, right?
Yeah, we'll go through it. We'll just
has
read
anybody
them.
tried to debate it?
When I tell people. These are the most, when you're walking through a whiskey aisle, I love watching people today, because there's 200 whiskeys in American whiskeys about, and there's new ones coming out every day. And I'm always fascinated, and I'll watch them, and you can tell when somebody doesn't know. They're buying a gift. That's usually the people who don't know much are buying a gift for Uncle Fred or something. And so they're looking, and they're looking at bottle shapes. And it's one reason why we do spend time sometimes making different bottle shapes and, ornate bottles. A lot of our old bottles are just what we call standard tall rounds. That's this Old Fitz bottle or that JTS Brown bottle, right? Or the Mellow Corn bottle, the JW Dan. That's just a basic tall round. There's nothing, you can't look at that until that's a brand. Well, you can look at one of our Elijah Craig bottles or one of our new Elijah Craig bottles and go, that's Elijah Craig. I mean, It's like that old Absolute vodka ad. You see the bottle shape. That's it. Coca-Cola, they hang their hat on that. You see that outline of the Coca-Cola bottle. Damn it, that's a Coca-Cola bottle, right? You can look at a Jack bottle sometimes and go, that's Jack Daniels, or whatever. So there is some marketing that goes in. I tell people all the time, we are in the bourbon business, not the bourbon charity. There's some things we do to make money. Sorry. Absolutely, we're not sorry because, we wouldn't be able to do this and have these great whiskeys if we didn't make money, right? So we got to make money first and foremost. So no apologies for that. But you can't get by these words on labels that mean things. So when I do trainings around the country and around the world, I tell people that these words, Kentucky Straight, bourbon whiskey, distilled and bottled by, bottled in bond. These are like Boy Scouts earning badges or military men and women earning medals. If you're a Boy Scout and you learn how to build a fire, if you want to get that badge, you've got to demonstrate that skill. And then you receive the badge and you wear it on your chest with pride because not everybody in the troop has been able to win that badge. If you're an expert marksman, you wear that medal on your chest with pride because not everyone on your base has that. You have that along with a few selected people. So you look at these words on labels. Kentucky Straight bourbon whiskey. There's our badges and our medals. So we look at the laws. And if you read on here, so we're gonna read whiskey. So I'm gonna have you read.
I'll read one.
Class 2 whiskey.
Class 2 whiskey.
Just read that definition.
Class 2 whiskey.
While I'd sip my 4-year-old Old Barnes.
There you go. And that's whiskey with a Y, not an EY in this.
And isn't that interesting that there's no E in any of the standards of identity?
Exactly. And it says it's an alcoholic distillate from a fermented mash of grain produced at less than 190 proof in such a manner that distillate possesses the taste, aroma, and characteristics generally attributed to whiskey stored in oak containers, except that corn whiskey do not need to be stored, and bottled at no less than 80 proof, and also includes mixtures of such distillates for which no specific standards of identity are prescribed.
So, any grain.
In layman's terms.
So the way I interpret that is any grain anywhere in the world. Bottled up to any proof. In the scientific world, about 190 is the highest you can, unless you're in space, you can get it up to 194 or something like that. I was
about to say 190 is up
But,
there, right?
Everclear is basically 190 proof, right? So any grain, any in the world, distilled up to any proof. I've just described vodka, right? So what makes it whiskey? Stored in oak. And then it has to look and smell and taste like whiskey. And to do that, I can add whatever I can, any other materials to it to make it look, smell, and taste like whiskey, because I've basically just made vodka. So just like in the 1800s, I can make neutral spirits and add my cherry juice, prune juice, tobacco spit, or today, caramel coloring, sugars to make it look, smell, and colors to make it look, smell, and taste like whiskey. So there's whiskey. So there's the whiskey badge. That's not vodka, right? Because we had to buy a barrel or have some sort of oak. It doesn't say barrel, it's oak. So you got to make a little bit more. It's not just vodka or Everclear. So we get the whiskey badge if it says the word whiskey on it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now it's not just whiskey.
Ryan's up now.
We're bourbon whiskey. So underneath, here's whiskey, and the next one is bourbon whiskey.
So
Bourbon whiskey. And you'll be surprised to see that bourbon whiskey is not the only whiskey that it defines.
There's several here.
I feel like we're in a classroom and then the teacher's calling on you to make sure you read.
Sorry, grade school teachers. I failed you. So bourbon whiskey, rye whiskey, wheat whiskey, malt whiskey, or rye malt whiskey is whiskey produced at not exceeding 160 proof from a fermented mash of not less than 51% corn, rye, wheat, malted barley, or malted rye grain, respectively, and stored at not more than 125 proof in charred new oak containers, and also includes mixtures of such whiskeys of the same type.
So how does that different from just whiskey? It's not just any grain, right?
Specific grains.
So it's 51% of those specific grains. So if you're making bourbon, it has to be at least 51% corn. If you're making rye, it must be at least 51% rye. If you're making wheat whiskey, or as Stewie Griffin would say, wheat whiskey. Like our Bernheim wheat whiskey, that has to be at least 51% wheat. If it's malt whiskey, it must be at least 51% malt. And if it's rye malt whiskey, it must be at least 51% rye malt. Then after that, it all shares. It must be aged in not just oak, but brand new charred oak every single time. Not just oak like whiskey. And there's a further 125, no more than 125 proof to be stored in. Whiskey, you could store it to 190, but not bourbon, rye malt. So, and then I can't add any other color. It has to be only mixed with the other stuff just like it. So that's a big restriction, right? So that's another badge.
Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point of sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in-line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon. If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription.
I guess a good question to ask you before we get back to this is, it says you can make all these different types of whiskeys. How come when we see in the market today, it's flooded with just kind of bourbon whiskey? There's not a whole lot of rye whiskeys or malt whiskeys or anything like that.
There's a lot of ryes out there now.
I know rye bottled and bond. You got Rittenhouse, right? And then
H. Taylor.
And H. Taylor. Okay. So other than that, I'm not too sure what else is out there.
Well, we got mellow corn, which is the only bottled and bond straight corn whiskey in the world, which is the next definition out here because its laws are different.
It's your turn.
Yeah. But yes, that's the whole idea of this, and you're really getting it, is that you can make all this, right? And at Heaven Hill, we're the only ones that do. We're the only major distiller that makes every style of American whiskey. Right now, you hit the nail right on the head. People only making bourbon, maybe rye. The big boys, right? The big boys and girls. Why? That's selling. Why aren't they making other things? Well, there's not big demands for it, and there's not much money, and they are owned by stockholders, and Wall Street is looking at them saying, you better drive profits every single month, every single quarter, or your stock price is going down. Well, it doesn't make any sense for them to have a straight corn whiskey that's aged because it doesn't make, that's a small little category.
Right.
We sell probably less than 10,000 cases of that a year.
Looks like it's popular here, though, because it's about empty.
It's a great one here at Bern's Corner. It's very popular. Right? So in rye whiskey, it took everybody by surprise. So unless you were Wild Turkey, Heaven Hill, Jim Beam, Buffalo Trace, you didn't have rye whiskey. And just recently, Brown-Forman got into the Woodford rye, and that they didn't have rye whiskey before that. And that's why everybody went to MGP to buy that 95.5 rye, because nobody had any rye whiskey. And the only place you could buy it from was not one of us, because we barely had enough for what we had. You had to go buy it from somebody who was just sitting on the barrel sitting back there that nobody paid attention to. And that's how that became such a big player.
Right.
But yeah. And so we think it's just a matter of time before people catch up to the wheat whiskey and corn whiskey. And now we have our malt whiskey that was Parker's a couple of years ago. It'll probably be an everyday thing. So we're way ahead of being a family owned company, you can be ahead of a curve. That's coming. Because if you just read that all those have the same restrictions, they must be great whiskeys, right? They're made just like bourbon and rye.
Right.
So
have to be aged at least 4 years.
I want some. You know, what does it taste like? So it's pretty cool.
Let's try it.
So let's try it. So now you got the corn whiskey. So you say it's a popular one here, and it is. I'll read the definition for corn whiskey. Now, the whiskey, it says, except corn whiskey need not to be stored. It's only whiskey. One of the only whiskeys I know doesn't have to be stored. Because whiskey has to be stored, except that exception. Right? Mm-hmm. So corn whiskey doesn't have to be.
Why is that? Who lobbied?
I think he's going to tell you.
I don't know.
I don't know why. I don't know the why. So, but it's there. Corn whiskey is whiskey produced not exceeding 160 proof. That's the same as bourbon and rye. Boy, we're starting out still pretty restricted.
Similar, right?
Pretty restricted. From a fermented mash of not just 51%, but corn whiskey has to be at least 80%. And if stored, because it says up here it doesn't have to be, but if you do store it, it must be stored at no more than 125 proof. Wow, that's just like bourbon and rye and all that. Mm-hmm. I thought corn whiskey was just some cheap shit. It's like, no, wait a minute. This is made with the same, it's big standards. In used or uncharred new oak. Two different types we can use. Mm-hmm. And not subjected in any manner to treatment with charred wood, and also excludes mixtures of such whiskey. So it has to be other types of corn whiskeys mingled in there. So here's where the little interpretation comes in. It just says not with charred, but it says used. And most of our barrels are charred. They're used.
Right.
So but we can still use charred. It's been used once. So there's an interpretation. And you were asking about interpretation.
Yeah, I got you. So you could actually have something that was uncharred that might not have the flavor characteristics that you would get in mellow corn because it is actually been in a used charred barrel.
And we use a once used Evan Williams barrel. Okay, because we have them. We dump 1,000 of them a day, so we just fill them up a second time. And it's not like that, and that's one reason why corn whiskey it doesn't cost as much as bourbon whiskey. We've used the tea bag the second time, so we're getting one more hit out of it, right? And that's one reason why it's a light straw color because it's not getting the big vanillas and all those.
Evan Williams hogged it all before,
right? But with corn whiskey, you want that. It's not that we're saving money. It's for making corn whiskey, not bourbon whiskey. If you take a corn distillate and age it in a brand new charred oak container, the corn flavor, with the science that's happening inside that barrel is the corn flavor becomes neutral and only the sweetness remains. And then you have bourbon or rye or wheat or malt. If you age a corn distillate in a used charred or brand new uncharred, the corn flavor remains. And it tastes like corn. Mm-hmm. So isn't that cool?
Like Thanksgiving dinner, right?
Yeah. It also has to be at least 80% corn. People think that's the big difference. It's not. It does have to be at least 80% corn. But if we took that 80% corn whiskey, same recipe we make for mellow corn and Georgia Moon, and put that in a charred new oak container, it's going to taste pretty damn much like Evan Williams. Mm-hmm. We don't want that. We got Evan Williams, right? we want to have every style of American whiskey, so we have mellow corn then. And it becomes this beautiful, raw spirit that, and we'll taste some here in a second, that it is. So just grab that. There's only a little bit in there, but pour a little in your glass there. You guys are a little empty. I'm talking, whatever.
It's okay.
So there's corn whiskey.
Yeah. So
fine.
That's awesome. So we are getting into some of those pieces about it and definitely getting into some of those.
In a different badge. That's a different badge than bourbon.
Yeah.
But it's still, did you hear all the restrictions?
Oh, yeah.
So why wouldn't you want some? It's pretty cool. Did he leave you any? You're gonna have to have him taste it.
It's okay. We'll be all right.
I got to get the help down to the basement and get more mellow corn out.
It's okay.
Damn, that's actually pretty tasty.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
It's that raw. It tastes like corn.
Yeah.
It's like kettle corn with a kick. Yeah. And it's beautiful. Now, it's not bourbon. So you can't.
It is different.
You can't put it up against what we're drinking here and go, even though they're both 4 years old and both 100 proof and both bottle and bond and pretty damn near the same recipe, that shows you what a brand new charred oak barrel does.
Yep.
In most whiskeys of the world, Canadian, Irish, Scotch, Japanese, all aged in used barrels. Mm-hmm. So what a great illustration to bring alive the difference between a brand new and a used barrel.
Yeah.
Man, now I can understand when you go into class right now and you have your Elijah Craig or your Evan Williams, and then you got your mellow corn next to it, and you hear this spiel, right? So yeah, I can. That's awesome.
And the spiel is the laws. There's no getting around the laws. There's no marketing talk here. This is all the laws, right? Then we look at the word straight. We got another question. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. Let's go. Let's go one more into it to straight, and then we'll kind of proceed a little bit.
Find straight here. It's a few pages back.
Pop quiz, about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Whiskeys conforming to the standards prescribed in paragraphs above that have been stored in the type of oak containers prescribed, which for corn whiskey would be
oak or new. Let's see. It can be brand new oak, or it can
be a quiz, right?
Or it can be a used char barrel.
Or for bourbon and rye,
has to be a new oak,
right?
New charred barrel.
So that's why it says the types of barrels, containers prescribed. They don't list the kind because they all have different ones. For a period of 2 years or more shall be further designated as straight. So the word straight means it has to be aged in the appropriate types of containers for a minimum of 2 years.
Got it.
So we earn that badge. So look for those words: straight bourbon whiskey, straight rye whiskey, straight corn whiskey.
Straight corn. Mm-hmm. This means it's at least 2 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's got that badge.
Yeah. And a lot of your craft distillers today don't earn those badges because they can't wait 2 years. They've their brother-in-law's a neurosurgeon and gave you $5 million to build this distillery, right? And you go out and you start distilling, and you go, well, shit, we got to pay some of this. My brother-in-law wants his money back, right? So I've got to, we got to start selling this stuff. We got to get this stuff. So, good whiskey's good at 6 months, right? We can do that, right? And there's a lot of it out there. There's a ton of 6 and 8 and 10 month and 12-month old whiskey out there that people are spending $50, $60, $80 a bottle for, and they're on the shelf right now. And people are just gobbling them up because the bottle looks great. Oh my God, it's $80. It must be good.
And it's craft.
Oh, let me look at this. Mellow corn. It's $12. It doesn't even have a very good color to it. Now I'll buy this.
Look at that bottle.
I'll buy this other shit.
I'll buy
the $100 bottle stuff. And that's what happens. And so words on labels mean things. And if you think that's not very good, it's some of the most restricted whiskeys in the world, right? And then you got Kentucky, another great word on there, which I think now means more than ever. Based in here, it just says it's the state of distillation. Mm-hmm. So has to be distilled and aged in that state.
Right.
Kentucky.
And then I guess one thing to hit on the last piece of it is why the 4 years? Is that where the bottled and bond comes in? Is the 4 year mark?
Bingo. Okay. See, student's going to do well.
Get my dunce cap. Take that off now.
Yeah. But think about Kentucky now. How important is Kentucky? 95% of the world's bourbon comes from a 60-mile radius of where we're sitting here at Bern's Corner. Okay. So why did that happen? Well, it must be a pretty good area to make whiskey, right? Plus, after Prohibition, this is where a lot of the distilleries were.
I could say it could have been dumb luck.
There were some in Illinois. There were some in Indiana. There was some in Tennessee. How come it's lasted here? Well, first of all, we had the families who distilled it. The Beam family, for one. A lot of distillers in the Beam family. We have Beams in our distillery. There's Beams over there. There was Beams at Elmo Beam. It was the first distiller at Maker's Mark. If you're a Beam, you knew how to make whiskey. It was pretty important. Not every state has people who know, like I said, if you have that neurosurgeon and he gives you $5 million and you go to Vendome and buy a still and you sit it there, do you know how to turn it on? No, you need experience and, just tinkering around with it. And you're like, hey, I made my first run. Well, shit, I'm the master distiller here at Bob's, that's how they do it. So, it's amazing, right? And here's an $80 bottle that's 6 months old. Oh, I'd love to buy it.
Enjoy it.
So I can just see all the craft distillers that are listening to this just cracking up.
They're cringing. They're like, that's our plan.
I didn't say all. I had one example of a guy's brother-in-law who's a neurosurgeon. Right? There's other people who study and go to school who do this, and there's a lot of great ones out there that are doing a phenomenal, great job, and I can run through a list if you want. They're my favorites. But Corsair, I think, has done an amazing job. In Bowling Green and Nashville, I think they've just done an amazing job of what they're doing and how they're doing it. But, they didn't just get $5 million from their brother-in-law. So I don't mean to step on anybody.
No, it's
one example of this guy, Bob's. So Kentucky, we have the experience. Not everybody has 8, 9 generations of a Beam family or 3 or 4 generations of the Russell family and, Jimmy Rutledge hanging around and Greg Davis over here at Maker's Mark who, learned how to brew and then was at Barton and came up through the ranks and, kind of stuff. We have a lot of great experience. We also have the limestone water. Remember, we got the shelf under here that sits there, but, let's be honest, 2017, you can fix water. We also have 4 extreme seasons. We have spring and fall, then we have winter and summer.
That's what I try to say is you cannot duplicate our weather.
Yeah.
It's like it was 70 2 weeks ago, and now, today it was 28. I mean, you just can't duplicate that anywhere else in the country.
It gets over 100 degrees in July and August. It gets 0 or below 0 in the wintertime. So not everybody has that. So we need that to move that whiskey in and out of these barrels. So the question I pose to people is, do you want Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey or do you want Florida straight bourbon whiskey? And they always chuckle. Well, of course you want Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, right? Because their water's not very good, but like I said, you can fix water. You can fix water. Let's be honest. You can fix water.
You can hire a team of Brita engineers to figure that out.
I don't even know if I want North Dakota straight bourbon whiskey because it's all cold, no hot. And where's the movement coming from? So where is that? And where does, Mr. Distiller, you've been open for 2 years now. Where do you find your whiskey tastes best in your warehouse? oh, wait a minute, you don't have warehouses, right? Because you're not in Kentucky and you don't have the Busicks to build your warehouses. They're the only people who build them, right? So that's another thing to make Kentucky whiskey, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, is because we have those rick houses. You go to distillers out in Colorado and Washington, they're in a building that's just like a warehouse. It's heated and it's cooled, and their barrels sit on top of each other in those metal racks like you see them at wineries.
Yeah.
That's not a rick house. That's not getting extreme temperatures in the summertime and the wintertime. That's just, you got it set on 60, So you can only get that here. So there's a reason it's here. And Kentucky means more on a label now than ever because it's being made in all 50 states probably.
And we're going to agree with you on that.
There's no bigger advocate than that in Kenny. Trust me. He's all Kentucky, which I am too.
I'm kind of a snob about it, but that's with good reason too. So let's go ahead and let's get back to the topic at hand right now. And one of the things I kind of want to talk about back again with the harp on the Bottle and Bond Act a little bit. You kind of talked about Issac Wolfe Bernheim, I.W. Bernheim, and why he was kind of why he was against this. Why was he against?
I don't know. I haven't done that research. My guess is, like anybody else, this is the first time that the government wanted to get into somebody's business.
Right.
That's a slippery slope. You had a lot of people he came from Europe. I think he was from Germany. Bernheim, it's House of Bernie, by the way. Bernheim, yeah. Meine Großeltern ist von Oldenburg, Deutschland, yeah. So I'm German.
No, not a thing.
So, they came from places that had, the Kaiser, and then they'd been oppressed. To have government come into you, I think that'd be a hard thing.
Once they start regulating one thing, what else are they going to regulate?
And that's my guess at best. I haven't done the research for that, but
So they were conservatives.
Well, I would think so. I would think he was also a businessman, but I think as it turned out, I think he would say that it turned out pretty good.
Yeah.
So, and you wouldn't know, hindsight is 20/20. So you say that, is this just a whatever? We just read those laws. There were little paragraphs. Here's the law of bottle and bond. It's the whole page. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is on my website. All these laws, these are, you can actually go to my website, whiskeyprof.com. I'm not trying to get people off yours.
No, it's okay.
But if you wanted to see these and read these along, you can read along with us today. You can do that. So there's the laws of what makes bottle and bond. So on top of these laws here, and I'll go through them real quickly. The words bond, bottle and bond, aged in bond, phrases containing these or synonymous terms shall not be used on any label as any part of the brand of domestic distilled spirits. Spirits, not just whiskey, unless it conforms to the following. So right there, we're learning that it has to be a domestic. It has to be made in the United States. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's hard to have laws for any other country. So.
Right, yeah, I can't really impose that.
Yeah. So composed of the same kind of spirit produced from the same class of materials. So there's a little interpretation there. Does that mean I can't mix corn whiskey with bourbon whiskey? I think that's what it kind of says. Yeah. The same kind of spirits. So you can't. It has to be that one thing. Produced in the same distilling season by the same distiller at the same distillery.
That's saying one location.
That's one location, and then one distilling season. You remember the old, I don't know if I have any around here, the old tax stamps that used to say spring and fall?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those are the two seasons. So spring is January through June. Fall is July through December. So it's a finite number of barrels you make in 1 6-month period. That's why you don't find these brands or 4 million case brands, or you will never find that because it's a finite number of barrels. So it's like a vintage, if you will, a reserve. It's only this stored for a minimum of 4 years. Straight's 2, bottle and bond now is 4. Right? In wooden containers where the spirits have been in contact with the wood surface, except for gin and vodka. Have you ever seen a gin and vodka bottle and bond? Here's why. Which must be stored for at least 4 years in wooden containers coated or lined with paraffin or other substance which preclude the contact of the spirits with the wood surface. So I got to think that the whiskey distillers did this. It's like, screw those guys.
Who's going to put paraffin inside the container?
They can make vodka and gin today, sell it tonight. We got to wait 4 years. Are you kidding me? We got to put a law in there, so they got to wait. And they didn't want theirs to be affected by the wood, so they said, we go to line it with paraffin. You can see how this goes. So just pure water only, reduced in proof by the addition of pure water only to 100 degrees. There's your proof gallon.
Yep.
Okay. And bottled exactly at 100 proof. In addition to the requirements, the label shall bear the real name of the distillery or the trade number which the distillery produced and warehouses spirits, and the plant or registered distillery number which produced. Okay. Also, the plant in which it bottled. So you not only got to make it at one place, you got to tell the real name of the distillery. And we own a few real names, okay? We have Heaven Hill, we have Evan Williams, we have Elijah Craig. That still could be I'm confused. Mm-hmm. But just like you cut your through confusion, you got to put the DSP, the distilled spirits plant number of which distilled it. And if they bottled it at a separate plant, you got to put that on there. Now that one,
So it's Stonegate Distillery, but it's DSP.
but that's the real name of the distillery that owned that name.
Yeah.
That might not be a Heaven Hill name, but that's the real name of the distillery. But if you still wanted to further, no, you read that and knew exactly it was DSP KY31. That is as transparent as you can possibly get. And on here, it says distilled and bottled by DSP KY1. Because remember, we had the fire.
Yeah,
so
Bernheim.
now Bernheim is DSP KY1, but also it says DSP KY31 because that's our bottling plant. So when I say that Bottle and Bond, it has all the badges. It has all the medals. So that's the Eagle Scout, right? It's got all the badges. Mm-hmm. It's the Navy SEAL or the Green Beret. It's got all the medals. Why wouldn't you have every single one that's made like Bern's Corner does? And when people come over here, as you all are, I mean, I got a lot of great stuff. And there's no I don't say you can't have this or that. This is what they drink. Because it's good stuff you can get every day at a great price.
Absolutely.
And that's why Bottle and Bond's important today, more important than ever.
So talk a little bit more about the kind of
I'm going to pour some.
Yeah, please do. Please do. I want to talk a little bit about the masterminds that were kind of behind this. You kind of mentioned the Secretary of Treasury at the time, John Carlisle.
Mm-hmm. And his picture was on the tax stamps.
Oh, okay. But I kind of want to also talk about maybe people think of Colonel Taylor kind of being associated pretty heavily with this because he's got a long history of just being inside of lawsuits. Did he? I mean, I've
also read that Ezra Brooks was really important. They were more lobbyists. Mm-hmm. So Colonel Taylor didn't write the law. I think that John Carlisle he was from Kentucky. I think they all knew each other, and I think he said, hey, I need some help. I mean, Colonel Taylor was
the good old
the mayor. He was a mayor too of Frankfurt, wasn't he? He was a mayor. He was involved in politics. So I would imagine that John Carlisle, and of course they were all, we all know what the colonels was, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a military colonel. It's like Colonel Bean wasn't a milary coln't, right? Blanton.
He didn't play basketball.
I was going to say it was an ABA basketball team.
Colonel
right?
Blanton wasn't a military colonel. Wasn't it wild? They all had the same rank. We all know what that is, don't we?
What, a military colonel?
You kids today, you don't know what a colonel is? I'm Colonel Lubbers. I'm Colonel.
Oh, you
Lubbers.
mean the Kentucky colonels?
They're all Kentucky colonels,
there
right?
We go.
And that is a what kind of organization? A political type of organization, right? So that's he found good lobbyists and
we're
good
even
people.
getting schooled.
Yeah, that's right. You can take to the woodshed here. So that's and like Mr. Bernheim wasn't particularly for it, but he had a lot of people that were out there who were trying to who saw the big picture. And like I said, I think Mr. Bernheim would be proud that the way it turned out.
I mean, during this whole time, there had to have been a lot of people, as you said, that were lobbying. Like, do you know of anything that maybe was done under the table or palms that were greased or anything like that to be able to kind of
we just saw it. The vodka and gin. Mm-hmm. That was a.
That's just a
that's
stab
whatever.
in the back. Yeah.
I mean, it had to be. And there's a lot of talk that these wooden containers, that was the barrel cooperage lobby who lobbied for that it had to be stored for 2 years. And it had to be a brand new charred barrel because the coopers were big. There was tons because everything was shipped in barrels. And as other materials came to be, like the steel drum and the container ships and things like that in the 1960s, that's when that starts going on. They came under fire. no pun intended. So, they were trying to find anything they could to make sure that their industry was safe.
We're not gonna let these plastic barrels.
So I'm sure there was lots of $100 handshakes being handed out back then, and that's how politics works.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've got a note here that President Grover Cleveland signed this bill on March 3rd, 1897, as you had said earlier. Now, at that time, we knew that this was.
Here's to President Cleveland.
There you go.
Cheers, Cleveland.
Cheers to that. And this is at a time when, as you said, whiskey's still going. This is before Prohibition. And there were a lot of, was at this point, was everybody making bottled and bond? Was like people were really trying to strive there? Or were there a lot of brands that just ceased to exist after that for bottled and bond? Like, I guess a better question is what percentage of bottled and bonds have we lost over that period of time?
We lost a lot. So it took a long time for people to realize what bottle and bond was. Here we are 120 years later, and I'm telling you what bottle and bond is. People are hearing this for the first time. So it's like going back from square one. So companies had to, that's why we put on the labels. We weren't bottling things before the Bottle and Bond Act either. We were just sending barrels out to places. Bottling lines cost money. And they cost a lot of money now. And imagine back then, it was all hands-on. It was all hand filling and hand labeling and all that kind of stuff. So you didn't want to screw with that. That's money. It's easier for me just to send a barrel over to you. But it would be much easier for you to mess with that barrel and top it off with water or lower the proof, whatever. So is that really Old Crow in that barrel? It doesn't taste like it did 6 months ago out of that barrel, So one way to ensure the quality of your product was to bottle it. And now because of the Bottle and Bond Act and words on labels mean things, now you saw things being bottled. So that brought about that. Then they had to educate. So here's a letter from, which one of you wants to read this?
I'll go ahead and read this one. Okay, so
there's a cool letter, and it's from 1909.
I will say, so it has the old granddad seal up on here, and it's I can't even say where's it from. I see Brent Falls.
Look at that beautiful. There's two locations for this. This is a really cool piece of history, and it tells you, and Louisville's involved in this. So
right.
there's two addresses on here.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start. It says, gentlemen, we wish to advise that the demand we have been having for our old granddad bottle and bond under our label probably is what it is, and under private labels of our customers has been very heavy in the last 60 days that we have been unable to fill the orders as promptly as customary with us. By the way, it's not that I'm bad at reading. It's just this was
on a real typewriter. There's kind of mistakes on it. So
I might be from Kentucky, but I can read.
They were running low on toner.
Mr. Wathen's secretary wasn't all that good.
Yeah. Therefore, we are writing to inform you that should you desire any of our goods to be bottled and bond under our label or yours for your Christmas trade, it would be well for you to favor us with your order. What's it say? Before the amounts you would, or for the amounts that you want, even though you would not care to have shipment made until December 1st. For by having the orders now, it will enable us to be able to get the shipments out on the date you desire. Hoping, therefore, if interested, that we will have the pleasure of hearing from you at an early date with our best wishes. We are very yours truly, Old Granddad Distillery by O.H. Wathen.
Mm-hmm. So that's 1909. And that's happens to be the same year that the Taft decision was made. But so it looks like it took from 1897 till 1909 to people to really understand what it was. And they saw that it was a quality stamp that was on these labels. And they started demanding. So this guy's saying, look, if you want, to his distributor, we're running out of this stuff. So you better, bottle and bond was like it's taken off, just like it took 30 years for small batch and single barrels to take off, and that's what everybody wants. You couldn't give it away. Remember, Pappy sat on the shelf at $89, 23-year-olds, case deep. People didn't want older whiskey back then. That's kind of a new thing. So bottle and bond was a new thing. But here we have historically this letter in 1909 saying it's taken off. And so then we had Prohibition, of course. So Prohibition, here's the only way you could get whiskey, and I'm holding up a prescription. And it was bottle and bond. So this is, I just handed Ryan a bottle of Old Granddad that I just happen to have, and it's from what's the seasons on it?
Made in spring of 1917, bottled in spring of 1932. So that's a big gap.
Because you couldn't make
Yeah.
whiskey during Prohibition, you had to make
Right.
whiskey before. So the only time we ever had older whiskey was during Prohibition like this, and people didn't want it really. They wanted the 4, 5, and 6-year-old stuff. We drink the 17-year-old stuff if we had to, but this is the only way you could get it was
Funny
a
how
doctor's
times
prescription. So, and that's a pint bottle. So you can only get it, and it came in a box because it says medicine right on front of it.
Yep.
So this poor lady here, Carrie Augustus, in 1931, she became so ill that she had to get a prescription, and I hope she pulled through. Right, I really do. So
For the sake of this podcast,
the prescription the doctor hand wrote here was whiskey, wine glass full, thrice daily. I hope the poor dear pulled through, right? So people still during Prohibition, bottle and bond was the good stuff, right? It's what was the industry standard. It was what people got. So it became, and after Prohibition, it's what distilleries strive to be, because during Prohibition, you still had Hiram Walker making Canadian Club. You still had Sam Bronfman making Seagram's, VO, and all that, which were not they had no Prohibition up there. So they was, that they didn't miss a beat, and they had aged stuff like this. So when Heaven Hill and other distilleries start back up after Prohibition, we make barrel serial number 1 on December 13th, 1935. Other distilleries make their barrel number 1s. They're not going to make blended whiskey because they don't want to compete with, Sam Walton, or Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. Gosh, they got it down, and they got aged stocks. They don't have bottle and bond though. That's going to make us different, and people are going to want that bottle and bond again. And so Heaven Hill Gold Label bottle and bond comes out in 1939, and and bottle and bonds were back on the map. Okay, so yes, it came back in a big way. Here's from the Kentucky Standard, the Bardstown paper.
Oh yeah,
they ran this as what was happening 50 years ago this past year. And this says that
my basketball scores.
Yeah. So
I'm from Bardstown. Yeah.
Well, you can read it. Well, this liquor worth $840 on July 26, 1956, from the Bloomfield liquor store in Bloomfield was burglarized. Liquor valued at $840 was stolen. Most of the whiskey stolen was bottle and bond, the best in the store. Owner Dr. Harry Plock said. The thieves didn't want wine. Bottles of wine were taken from the shelves and left on the floor. And cases filled with the whiskey. 4/5 of scotch were taken from the shelf. 2 cases of wine taken from the store and were carried outside and left. They only took the bottle and bond stuff.
I'm surprised the scotch wasn't broken out front, sitting on this.
Bottle and bond is what everybody wanted, but it's according to Max, our president and one of our family owners. This was the time that there started to be a whiskey glut in the market. And that's what happened to bottle and bond, and kind of when it went away, because you had the Korean conflict, and during World War I and World War II, we were supposed to make high proof alcohol for the war effort. So we weren't being able to make whiskey. And so they said, well, we're not going to, we know we're going to go into Korea, looks like. So let's ramp up production so that when they come to us and say we got to make high proof alcohol for the war effort, we're not stuck short. And they never did. The technology changed. And so there
what
was
was the high proof liquor for the war fort? What is that used for?
It was to make parachutes and different synthetics.
Okay.
So then you had this glut, and then you also had the introduction of 2 new spirits that were never in the market, the U.S. market, which was vodka and tequila. And that's when they started seeing the lowering of proofs down to 80 and 86 proof to more compete with gins.
And the golden whiskey era and stuff like that.
And so that's when whiskey starts all going away.
Right.
And that's when we're just now at 6.7 million barrels in inventory as an industry, just now equaling what was the high in 1974. So we're just getting back to where we were. And most of your bottle and bonds went away. Well, Heaven Hill, we don't change a whole lot. I mean, this old Fitzgerald bottle and bond, we didn't change that label. That's the label from whenever long time ago. That mellow corn label is from 1945. We have never changed it. These old Heaven Hill labels, they don't change much, And so we don't
I think the marketing teams appreciate that, but yeah. So let's go ahead. This has been awesome because we've really dove into the history.
A lot of information.
Dove into the reason why, and this has been fantastic. But I want to kind of go to today. What's the importance of actually having bottled to bond today? Because we don't have people that are, you don't have a jar of Bernie spit that were pouring into bottles of Elijah Craig. We don't
saw
have
some skull being spit. Back.
I'm just saying, this is a different era when you shouldn't. I don't think you should have to worry about that. We don't have, we still have what are technically considered bonded warehouses, but the government isn't coming. They're not sitting there with another lock and key, and they're not checking it. So what's the point of having bottled and bond today?
Trust me, the government is coming, and they do have keys, and they do levy a lot of. I think we get audited on a regular basis. So we haven't had agents to live on the distillery since the late 60s, early 70s. So sure, and I've even had other distillers say, "You're talking about bottle and bond. It's from a bygone era," just like you just said. And if that's the case, if it doesn't mean anything, why is it still in the books? It's right here. I mean, if you're going to say that, well, let's just throw out the rules for bourbon too.
Well, it's not that. I mean, it's not the rules can always be there, right? I mean, it's the whole thing of, I'm not allowed to walk around with an ice cream cone in my back pocket in Lexington, but
well, my point is, nobody's
going to do it.
But why have the bourbon law?
Well, I'm just saying, why would everybody want to start making bottled and bond still when you could just say, oh, we'll just go ahead and is it just to have another badge?
Trust me, it's hard to make bottled and bond. You have to have enough whiskey that you're producing to feed the engine that pulls your train. The engine that pulls the Heaven Hill train is Evan Williams. The engine that pulls Jim Beam's train is Jim Beam White Label Jim Beam. The engine that pulls Brown Forman's train is Jack Daniels. The one that pulls Buffalo Trace is Buffalo Trace, right? Wild Turkey, the Wild Turkey 101. So you have to have enough for that engine. Then and only then can you come out with, your Parkers, your unicorns, if you will, your different ones, your barrel proofs, your corn whiskeys, your death whiskey, whatever you're going to have. And then on top of it, you got to have enough that you make in a 6-month period to be a bottle and bond. Well, that just shows you got to be a pretty big distillery. And then you got to have the wherewithal to do that because, trust me, we're audited every couple of years. The government is coming. And they're knocking on the door, and there's several people to come in, and they check. And we usually have to pay money when they leave because, this has to be, the proof gallons have to be exactly 100 proof. They don't care if it's 100, 101, right? Because, they don't care if it's 90, 98.
Right.
And you're paying money on 100.
Yeah.
They worry if it's 101 and you're only paying on 100. And so they're doing the things, and they usually end up paying money because the reason they only audit us is because we have money. They're not going to come to Bob, whose poor brother-in-law has already paid $5 million for the
neurosurgeons.
They don't have any money to pay, right? And they don't have enough. So they're going to come after the big guy. We're more regulated than anybody because we have money, right? And so, yes, it's still on the books. And the reason you don't see them is because they're not high volume products.
Absolutely.
So you don't see other big distilleries because you're not going to mess with them. But recently Jim Beam came out with their bottle and bond. And you have the 1897 from
Old Forester.
Old Forester.
What do you think's brought that back? The interest in the bottled and bond?
Well,
he's going to argue that it never disappeared.
If you read Fred Minnick's book, Bourbon Curious, he credits Heaven Hill and myself with bringing it back because it takes some advocates to bring it back. And I've traveled over the country, and Heaven Hill has more than anybody. And so we have 5 really national bottle and bonds now. We have the Evan Williams bottle and bond. We have Rittenhouse bottle and bond. We have Mellow Corn bottle and bond. And we have Henry McKenna bottle and bond, the oldest age-stated bottle and bond on the planet. We have those 4 that are national.
And then this year's Parker's was.
But that's not every year.
Right.
We have this bottle and bond brandy. which is the only bottle and bond grape brandy in the world.
Oh, I did not know that.
We just came out with that. So we have 5. This is not national yet. But it's going to be. It's being very well received. So we have them, and so we've been talking about them for the last 5 years, and nobody else really has, and because they don't have them. I mean, and it's not important to Jimmy and Eddie Russell. They're known for 101. They can't be bottle and bond. So it's not a big deal over there. You know, they have their heritage and what they talk about, but to Heaven Hill, it's damn important. And it's really exciting. Has this been a fascinating talk?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, so it's a lot to talk about. I mean, I've got a letter from 1909.
And I can
I've
barely
got this
read
poor lady who just barely pulled through in 1933, and poor Carrie. You know, it does mean something, but not everybody can talk about it because they don't have it. I mean, right now, you've learned. So read the date on there, Ken.
I'll go ahead and read it.
Read the date.
So
when was it barreled?
We've got February 3rd of 2003, barrel number 988.
So what season was that made in?
Do I need to look on there's no tax
Now,
chart for
think about it. Spring season is what, and fall season is what?
Oh, sorry. So it would be in the fall, right? Or wait.
Spring is January through June.
Oh, okay. Then it would definitely be spring, right?
So
how much I'm paying attention.
So all of a sudden
right?
we're learning, right? We're learning, right? You know, some take a little longer to learn. But
It's not computers.
this was distilled in the spring of 2003. That's pretty cool to know. I mean, how many bottles on a back bar or in a shelf
Not any.
can you learn from somebody and if they don't have the word straight, I got questions. So that means this is not how old, if it doesn't have
4
it on
years.
there.
Or 2 years for straight.
2 years.
for
And
straight.
what can you do on top of it? You can add things to it. You can add caramel colors and flavors and sugars. Well, straight, you can only add pure water. In bottle and bond, you can only add pure water. So that word straight is extremely important. So if I don't see the word straight, I'm going to not buy that product.
So we need a label checklist. Like when we're going down the aisle, go through the checklist. I guess we're going through right now.
This is all on my website. You can all learn how to read a label and all in bottle and bond. So it's very interesting. You know, there's people out there paying $100 a bottle for something that's 8 months old.
Oh, yeah. You see it all the time. It's insane.
And here is a bottle of 6-year-old bottle and bond, the Eagle Scout, right? The Green Beret, and it's $12.99. The people.
And by the way, we're talking about the Heaven Hill bottle of bond 6 years.
It's a Kentucky only product. I tell people, you're stepping on bricks of gold to grab gold dust. Right? Now, you should always grab gold dust. It's not there all the time. So those are the unicorn bottles. You know, everybody wants the gold dust. Oh my God, I gotta grab it. So grab the gold dust, but pick up the gold brick that you just stepped on to get up to that gold dust. And that's there every day. So always grab the gold dust, but always pick up the brick of gold.
Well, this has been fascinating, I think, in my opinion. You know, we've learned a lot. You know, I knew coming into here, I kind of knew the basics, right? But I had never actually gone to the depth of reading the laws, trying to understand a little bit more and everything like that. And definitely got me put on my toes at the same exact time as well.
Yeah, I feel like I stepped back into the classroom in college. You know,
That's why I'm the whiskey professor.
I better pay attention or I'm going to get smacked.
That's right.
So with that, unless there's anything else to kind of really add about bottle and bond that you kind of want to close out with?
Well, you know, it's the Eagle Scout, it's the Navy SEAL, and it's the Green Beret. So my challenge to everybody is go out and buy every single one you can.
Yeah, you can buy most of them for the price of those unicorns, you know?
You know, I call it a 4-for-1 deal. The 4 that I mentioned, it costs about what one E.H. Taylor single barrel does. And you've got, not only do you have a single barrel, it's a 10-year-old age-stated single barrel. That one isn't age-stated, but this is.
We're not supposed to say Henry McKenna on our show.
So I think it's a 4. And obviously, I have E.H. Taylor on my bar. Mm-hmm. It's a phenomenal whiskey. So because it's an Eagle Scout, you know, there's a reason, and they're not ripping you off, by the way, that's $80 a bottle or $75 or whatever it is. That's single barrel. I call Heaven Hill the Reno, Nevada of distilleries. We're the biggest little distillery in the world. We make a lot more than they do. So we can charge a little bit less. You know, Max and the family, they're going to get the same amount of money whether you sell 12 of something or 1 of something. Well, we have the strength of having 12 of something to their 1 of something. So we don't have to charge as much. It's pretty simple economics. So they're not ripping you off. They just don't. It's from one finite number of barrels in a 6-month period. We have more than they do. So grab, please. You grab every one you can. We're lucky in Kentucky. We have a lot that the national market doesn't have. We have little brands, very old Barton, VOB. That's not bottle and bond everywhere. We have it here. We have JW Dent, JTS Brown, and TW Samuel, some really cool ones that are
and they
around.
won't break the bank either,
Yeah. You can buy I think there's about 18 available.
Well, now I need to go add a few more, I guess, to my bar downstairs. What's a few more? What's a few more?
So everybody's looking for these Dusties, and everybody's looking for these unicorns.
Hey, I'm a Dusty guy.
Yeah. Obviously. But go out. I mean, the whole idea was these things are available every day. Go pick up the bricks of gold. Don't keep stepping on them and putting them back.
Well, awesome. So, Bernie, I want to say thank you again and for graciously having us in here, sharing your knowledge and some of your bourbon.
And your bourbon.
But before we go, I want to
and also whiskey, corn whiskey.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I got to say thank you for having Hill for letting you be able to come and advocate about this, because you can definitely tell that you're the man for the job when it comes to
Thank you.
talking about bottled and bond.
So he's got a damn tattoo on it.
I know, he's got the tattoo of it. So if anybody does want to get a hold of you, get in touch with you, Twitter,
I'm on Bernie Lubbers at Twitter. I'm on Facebook and my website, whiskeyprof.com. So if you can't get in touch with me, something's wrong.
Awesome. So again,
Twitter's Bernie Lubbers, Facebook's Bernie Lubbers, and whiskeyprof.com.
There we go. Perfect.
How do you spell Lubbers?
Lubbers.
Awesome. For anybody that was wondering. And with that, make sure you follow us at Bourbon Pursuit on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you do like what you hear, if you learned a lot of great stuff, make sure you support the show. We're going to try and have one or two more of these in the hopper for the month of March, because we kind of really want to focus back on the basics of bourbon. So look forward to the next few podcasts that are coming out, and support the show on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit.
Yeah, I really am enjoying this series and that we're doing it because, as a bourbon hunter, it's been frustrating trying to chase these unicorns. And my goal this year was to definitely get back to basics and go to those everyday bottles that, you can enjoy at an incredible value. So appreciate your time, Bernie. That was
my pleasure. Thank y'all for coming.
My brain's about
Thanks for coming by to Bern's Corner, making it easy.
Oh, I'm going to hang out a little bit more. Like I said, I got an Uber ride here, so I'm ready to go. But no, thank you.
Some of these sample bottles.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. Let's do it. But thanks again. And guys, if you have any show suggestions, comments, feedback, please let us know. We're here to bring the content, to you. So just let us know what you want to hear, and we'll see you next time.
It seems like that everybody always had a funny story about Parker when people would say they sit around and they smell this certain thing in the bourbon. He goes, I don't know what they're talking about. It's just rye and corn. So
he said, I taste banana in there because I didn't put no damn banana in there. He says, I taste good bourbon. That was always his line. I taste good bourbon.